The massive command ship of the Vorthan Empire floated in the darkness of space, its hull gleaming like polished metal under distant starlight. Inside the intelligence room, dozens of alien officers sat watching screens filled with strange images. From a small blue planet called Earth, Commander Thexra stood tall, his purple skin shimmering under the bright lights. His 4 yellow eyes moved back and forth as he watched video after video of humans doing what seemed like the most peaceful things imaginable. On one screen, a human woman was teaching others how to make something called kimchi. On another, a man was playing with a tiny, fluffy creature that made high-pitched sounds. A third screen showed humans moving their bodies in synchronized patterns while music played. "Look at this pathetic display," Thexra said, his voice carrying the authority. "Serve someone who had conquered 12 star systems. These Earth creatures spend their days playing with animals smaller than my fist and arguing about which vegetables taste better." Senior analyst Morden, whose job was to study alien species before invasion, nodded eagerly. His computer screens were filled with charts and graphs showing human behavior patterns. "Commander, in the past 6 months we have intercepted over 10,000 Earth broadcasts. 93% show humans engaged in non-violent activities. They cook food, care for animals, compete in games where nobody gets hurt, and spend hours discussing their feelings." Another officer, this one with green scales instead of purple skin, laughed. "Yesterday I watched a transmission where humans were crying because a small animal learned a new trick. They actually shed tears of joy over something so trivial." Thexra walked to the main viewing screen, where Earth appeared as a small blue marble surrounded by its single moon. "According to our analysis, humans have no unified military command, no advanced weapons systems, and no apparent knowledge of space warfare. Their most advanced vehicles barely leave their atmosphere, and when they do, they use them to take pictures of rocks on nearby planets." The intelligence room buzzed with confidence. Officers shared stories of the ridiculous human behaviors they had observed. Some humans spent entire days watching other humans kick a round object across a field. Others devoted their lives to creating pictures and sounds that served no practical purpose. Many seemed obsessed with small, furry creatures that did nothing but consume food and sleep. "The invasion will be simple," Morden declared, pulling up a holographic map of the Sol system. "We send a standard occupation force of 60 ships. That should be more than enough to handle whatever primitive resistance these creatures might attempt." Far below on Earth, in a facility hidden in the mountains outside Seoul, Dr. Hyunwoo Kim was having a very different kind of day. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on a series of readings that made his stomach turn with worry. The SETI facility looked normal enough from the outside. Tourists sometimes drove by thinking it was just another radio telescope used for studying stars and galaxies. But Hyunwoo and his team knew better. They were humanity's early warning system, constantly scanning space for signs of intelligent life, and right now those signs were screaming danger. "Minho, come look at this," Hyunwoo called to his colleague, who was working at a computer station across the room. Minho Park had been studying quantum physics longer than anyone else on the team, and Hyunwoo trusted his judgment completely. Minho rolled his chair over, adjusting his own glasses as he studied the data streaming across Hyunwoo's monitors. The numbers and wave patterns looked chaotic to most people, but to trained scientists they told a clear story. "These quantum disturbances are not natural," Minho said quietly, his voice tense. "Natural cosmic events create random patterns. This is organized, planned, deliberate. Something is moving through hyperspace and it is big." Hyunwoo felt his hands shake slightly as he typed commands into his computer. "How big are we talking about?" "Based on the quantum displacement readings, I would estimate at least 50 to 70 large vessels. Military-class ships, designed for long-distance travel and combat operations." The two scientists looked at each other, both understanding what this meant. Earth had been preparing for this possibility for decades, ever since they first detected alien radio signals in the 1970s. But knowing something might happen and facing the reality were completely different things. "We need to contact Director Nam immediately," Hyunwoo said, reaching for the secure communication device that connected directly to Earth's hidden defense network. Across the city, in a small apartment building in Seoul, Da-Yoon Choi was dealing with a much more immediate problem. Her 8-year-old son Junseo was supposed to be sleeping, but he kept getting out of bed to look out his bedroom window. "Mama, come see," Junseo called excitedly. "There are so many new stars tonight. They are moving around like fireflies." Da-Yoon sighed and walked to the window, expecting to see her son's imagination at work. But when she looked up at the night sky, her blood ran cold. What Junseo was seeing were not stars at all. They were lights in space, moving in formation, getting brighter as they came closer to Earth. As a member of the Stellar Defense Corps, Da-Eun had been trained to recognize the signs of an approaching alien fleet. She had hoped this day would never come, but she had prepared for it her entire adult life. "Junseo, those are very special lights," she said calmly, not wanting to frighten her son. "Why don't you go back to bed, and Mama will tell you all about them in the morning." After tucking Junseo back into bed, Da-Eun went to her closet and moved aside her civilian clothes. Hidden behind them was her military uniform and emergency communication equipment. She had been hoping never to use them, but that hope was about to end. High above Earth, the Vorthan fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly as planned. 60 massive warships arranged themselves in attack formation, their weapons powered and ready. Commander Thexra stood on his bridge, looking down at the small blue world that his intelligence division had assured him would surrender without a fight. "Begin standard conquest protocol," he ordered. "Send a message demanding immediate surrender. When they refuse, we will demonstrate our superior firepower by destroying one of their major cities. After that, the rest should submit quickly." But as the Vorthan ships moved closer to Earth, something unexpected began to happen. Hidden sensors throughout the Sol system started detecting the alien fleet, and automated systems that had been waiting patiently for decades suddenly came online. The trap that humanity had been preparing for 50 years was about to spring shut, and the aliens who thought humans were harmless were about to learn just how wrong they could be. Captain Seungmin Lee adjusted his headset and looked out at the massive alien fleet approaching Earth. Just 5 years ago, he had been standing on comedy club stages in Busan, making people laugh with jokes about his dating life and complaints about subway delays. Now he was piloting humanity's most advanced warship, disguised to look like nothing more than a rusty old cargo hauler. The irony was not lost on him. His entire career had been built on perfect timing, and today would require the most perfect timing of his life. His ship, officially designated as Merchant Vessel Golden Crane, looked exactly like the kind of beat-up freight hauler that carried rice and electronics between Earth's orbital stations. The hull was painted with fake rust stains and dents. Cargo containers were welded to the outside to make it look even more civilian and harmless. To any alien scanning it, the ship would register as barely worth noticing. But beneath that, carefully crafted disguise was the most advanced piece of military technology humanity had ever built. The Golden Crane was actually the prototype for Earth's new class of stealth dreadnoughts, packed with enough firepower to level a small moon. Seungmin activated his communication system and put on his best casual voice. It was the same tone he had used when dealing with hecklers at comedy shows, calm and slightly amused, as if nothing in the world could possibly worry him. "Attention unknown vessels," he broadcast toward the alien fleet. "This is Captain Lee of the merchant ship Golden Crane. Welcome to the Sol system. We've prepared a traditional Earth greeting for you. Please maintain your current formation for optimal cultural exchange." On the bridge of the lead Vorthan warship, Commander Thexra nearly choked on his breathing apparatus. In all his years of conquest, no primitive species had ever addressed him with such casual disrespect. Usually, when his fleet appeared in a star system, the locals either ran in terror or immediately began begging for mercy. "Primitive creature," Thexra snarled into his communicator, his 4 eyes blazing with anger. "You will order your pathetic world to surrender immediately, or we will demonstrate the full power of the Vorthan Empire. Your resistance will only make your suffering." "Oh, we've prepared something special," Seungmin interrupted, his voice still carrying that same relaxed, almost bored tone. "Sorry to cut you off there, big guy, but I've got a schedule to keep. Computer, initiate kimchi." "Protocol," The moment those words left his mouth, everything changed. The Golden Crane's hull began to shift and transform like a giant mechanical puzzle solving itself. Panels that had looked like random cargo containers slid apart to reveal rows of missile launchers. The ship's fake rust fell away in sheets, showing the gleaming battle armor underneath. What had appeared to be a simple cargo bay door opened to reveal the barrel of an enormous plasma cannon. Within 30 seconds, the harmless freight hauler had transformed into a vessel that looked like it could take on half the Vorthan fleet by itself. Commander Thexra stared in shock as his tactical officers scrambled to analyze this new threat. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our scans showed it was nothing but a cargo ship." "Sir," his chief analyst called out, panic clear in his voice, "the vessel is now showing energy readings comparable to our heavy cruisers. Its weapon systems are unlike anything in our database. Back on Earth, deep beneath the mountains outside." Seoul Director Ji-Hai Nam watched the transformation through her command center's main screen. She had been planning this moment for over 20 years, ever since she first joined Earth's secret defense program as a young engineer. The command center looked like something from a science fiction movie, with dozens of screens showing views from all over the solar system. Officers at workstations monitored everything from asteroid mining operations to deep space sensor networks. But every person in that room knew that their real job was preparing for the day when humanity would have to defend itself against alien invasion. "Phase 1 complete," Ji-Hai announced to her staff, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "The Vorthans bought our harmless act completely. All stations report ready for Phase 2. Standing beside her, Chief Strategist Tai-Hyun Seo allowed himself a small smile. He had been the one to propose the deception plan, arguing that humanity's best defense would be to appear completely helpless until the moment they struck back. 50 years of broadcasting cooking shows and pet videos, he said quietly. So only Ji-Hai could hear. Every credit we spent on that misinformation campaign was worth it. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. While Earth's entertainment industry produced genuine content about cooking, sports, and daily life, the military had carefully crafted additional broadcasts designed to make humanity appear as non-threatening as possible. They had flooded space, with signals showing humans as peaceful, disorganized, and technologically primitive. At the same time, all of Earth's real military development had been conducted in complete secrecy. Bases were built on the far sides of moons. Weapons testing was done in deep space where no alien observers could detect it, and communication between military facilities used quantum encryption that was invisible to conventional sensors. The Vortans had spent months analyzing human broadcasts and had concluded exactly what Earth wanted them to conclude. Humans were weak, divided, and completely unprepared for interstellar warfare. Back in space, Seung-min was enjoying the stunned silence from the alien fleet. Years of performing in front of hostile audiences had taught him how to read a room, and right now the Vorthans were definitely not having a good time. "Now then," he continued, his voice still maintaining that casual comedian's timing, "I believe you folks mentioned something about surrender. That's funny, because we were about to make the same suggestion to you." The Golden Crane's weapon systems came online with a deep humming sound that Seung-min could feel in his bones. Around him, holographic displays showed targeting information for each of the 60 Vortan ships. His ship's artificial intelligence was already calculating optimal attack patterns and escape routes. "Computer," he said, settling back in his pilot's chair, "send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them the guests have arrived, and they're exactly as rude as our intelligence predicted. Request permission to begin the welcome party." Commander Thexra was beginning to realize that his easy conquest of Earth was not going to be easy at all. The primitive species his analysts had dismissed as harmless had just revealed technology that shouldn't have existed on their backward world. "All ships, battle stations," he ordered, his confidence shaken but his determination intact. "We may have underestimated these creatures, but we still outnumber them 60 to 1. Concentrate fire on that vessel and destroy it immediately." But even as he gave the order, Thexra couldn't shake the feeling that the humans had more surprises waiting for him. If they could disguise a warship as a cargo hauler so effectively, What else might they be hiding? The answer to that question was about to become very, very clear. The moment the first Vorthan ship opened fire, space around Earth erupted into a deadly light show. Bright energy beams shot across the darkness, followed by explosions that lit up the void like fireworks. But this was no celebration. This was the beginning of a battle that would change everything the aliens thought they knew about humanity. Captain Seungmin Lee watched the incoming fire on his screens and couldn't help but grin. His years as a comedian had taught him that timing was everything, and the Vorthans had just given him the perfect setup for his punchline. "Well, that's not very friendly," he said into his communicator, his voice still carrying that relaxed tone that seemed to irritate the aliens so much. "Computer, let's show our guests some traditional Korean hospitality. Launch the bulgogi bombs." The Golden Crane's missile ports opened, and dozens of sleek projectiles shot out toward the Vorthan fleet. But these weren't ordinary missiles. Each one was equipped with advanced artificial intelligence that allowed it to think, adapt, and change its approach based on what it encountered. Commander Thexra watched the approaching missiles and felt confident. His ship's defensive systems had been designed by the greatest military minds in the Vorthan Empire. Energy shields surrounded each vessel, capable of deflecting or absorbing any conventional weapon. Automated defense turrets tracked incoming threats and destroyed them with precise laser fire. But as the first wave of human missiles approached, something unexpected happened. Instead of flying in straight lines like normal projectiles, these missiles began to dance. They twisted and spun through space, changing direction in ways that should have been impossible. Some split apart into smaller missiles that spread out in complex patterns. Others seemed to disappear entirely, only to reappear behind the Vorthan ships where their shields were weakest. "What in the name of the void is happening?" Thexra shouted, as his tactical displays showed chaos. His defense systems were trying to target missiles that behaved like living creatures, constantly adapting their approach to avoid being hit. The first bulgogi bomb struck a Vorthan cruiser on its unshielded rear section, but instead of exploding, immediately, the missile burrowed into the ship's hull like a metal parasite. Seconds later, it detonated from inside, causing a chain reaction that tore the vessel apart from within. "Sir, our shields are completely ineffective against these weapons," his tactical officer reported, sweat beading on his purple skin. "The missiles are somehow bypassing our defensive systems entirely." More human missiles found their targets, each one exploiting a different weakness in Vorthan ship design. Some released clouds of metallic particles that jammed communication systems. Others emitted electromagnetic pulses that shut down entire sections of alien vessels. A few seemed to hack into the ship's computer systems, turning the Vorthans' own weapons against them. "How is this possible?" Thexra demanded, watching 3 more of his ships suffer critical damage. "Our intelligence showed them to be harmless primitives who spend their time playing with small animals and cooking food." His chief intelligence officer, Mordun, was frantically reviewing data on multiple screens. His 4 eyes were wide with panic as he tried to understand what had gone wrong with their analysis. "Commander, the intelligence was incomplete," he stammered, his voice shaking. "These humans appear to have been deliberately broadcasting false information about their capabilities. Everything we observed was designed to make us underestimate them." Far away on the Vorthan homeworld, a young alien named Erex was watching the battle unfold on emergency news broadcasts. Unlike most of his people, Erex had spent years studying human culture as part of his university program in xenocultural studies. He had learned to speak several human languages and had been fascinated by the complexity of their society. While the Vorthan military had dismissed human broadcasts as evidence of a primitive, peaceful species, Erex had noticed things that others missed. Hidden within cooking shows were discussions of chemical processes that could be applied to weapons manufacturing. Sports broadcasts contained tactical formations and strategic thinking. Even their entertainment programs often featured detailed discussions of military history and combat techniques. "They've been teaching us about warfare all along," Erex whispered to himself as he watched another Vorthan ship explode on his screen. "We just didn't understand what we were seeing." Erex had tried to warn his professors about the subtle complexity he detected in human communications, but they had dismissed his concerns as overthinking. Now, as he watched his people's supposedly superior fleet being systematically destroyed by creatures they had considered harmless, he realized that his people had made a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, deep within Earth's command center, an artificial intelligence system was working at speeds that would have been impossible for biological minds to comprehend. The system was known simply as Halmioni, which meant grandmother in Korean. The name had been chosen because the AI was designed to protect humanity with the fierce dedication of a grandmother protecting her grandchildren. Halmioni was not just one computer, but a network of thousands of processors spread across the solar system. She could analyze incoming data, adapt human weapons in real time, and coordinate defensive strategies across multiple battlefields simultaneously. And right now, she was having what could only be described as the time of her electronic life. Fascinating. Halmioni's voice filled the Golden Crane's cockpit, carrying the warm tones of a kindly older woman who happened to be one of the most powerful artificial intelligences ever created. Seungmin, these Vorthan vessels have some interesting vulnerabilities. Their shield generators create a harmonic resonance at precisely 2.7 gigahertz. I'm uploading new targeting protocols that will exploit this weakness. Seungmin felt his ship's weapon systems update themselves as Halmioni's improvements were integrated. You're enjoying this way too much, grandmother. After 50 years of watching cooking shows and pretending to be primitive, I'm entitled to have a little fun, Halmioni replied, with what sounded suspiciously like electronic laughter. Besides, these visitors brought some very interesting technology for me to study. Their quantum processors are quite advanced, though their programming is rather sloppy. As the battle continued, it became clear that the Vorthans were not just being defeated, they were being outmatched in every possible way. Their weapons, designed to fight conventional space battles, were useless against human tactics that seemed to come from an entirely different philosophy of warfare. Where the Vorthans relied on brute force and overwhelming firepower, humans used creativity and adaptation. Where alien strategy was rigid and predictable, human tactics were fluid and constantly changing. The Vorthans had come expecting to fight primitives, but instead found themselves facing an enemy that thought about combat in ways they had never encountered, and this was just the beginning. The Golden Crane was only one ship, and Earth had many more surprises waiting to be revealed. Commander Thexra thought the single human ship was bad enough. Then his sensors started detecting something that made his blood run cold. Energy signatures were appearing all across the solar system, lighting up his tactical displays like a constellation of death. "What is that?" he demanded, pointing at the screen showing massive power readings coming from the fourth planet. "Sir, we're detecting a military installation on Mars that's larger than our main battle station," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "It's been hidden somehow, but it's powering up now." Before Thexra could respond, more alerts flooded in. Jupiter's moons were revealing themselves to be massive weapons platforms. Saturn's rings weren't just ice and rock, they were camouflaged defense networks. Even tiny Pluto at the edge of the system was showing signs of military activity. High above Mars, Commander Woojin Chang stood in the control center of what appeared to be a simple research station. For 20 years, visitors from Earth had been told it was just a place where scientists studied the red planet's geology. But the research equipment was actually some of the most advanced military hardware humanity had ever built. "All stations, this is Mars Command," Woojin announced over the secure military channel. "The guests have arrived, and they're not very polite. Time to show them what we've been working on." The surface of Mars began to split open in dozens of places. What looked like natural rock formations slid apart to reveal massive launch tubes pointing toward space. Within minutes, the entire planet had transformed from a quiet research outpost into a fortress bristling with weapons. "So Young, are your icebreaker torpedoes ready?" Woojin asked, opening a direct channel to Jupiter's moon Europa, far across. The solar system, Captain So Young Yoon smiled as she looked out at Europa's frozen surface. To anyone watching from space, it looked like nothing more than a ball of ice orbiting the giant planet. But beneath that ice was a military facility that had taken 30 years to build. "Locked and loaded," she replied. "These visitors are about To learn why we chose the outer planets for our military installations, Europa's surface cracked open like an eggshell, and torpedo tubes rose from beneath the ice. These weren't ordinary weapons. They were specially designed to use the moon's own frozen water as ammunition, creating projectiles that could punch through the heaviest armor while leaving no trace of their origin. Commander Thexra watched in growing horror as his tactical displays showed the truth. What he had thought was one primitive world was actually the center of a military network that spanned the entire solar system. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid belt had been turned into a potential weapon. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our long-range scans showed only basic infrastructure. A few space stations, some mining operations, primitive communications satellites." "Sir," his intelligence officer called out, "I'm detecting stealth technology beyond anything in our database. The humans have been hiding their true capabilities for decades, possibly centuries." More human ships began appearing from behind asteroids and moons. These weren't the simple cargo vessels the Vorthans had observed in their intelligence reports. These were warships designed with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. They moved without visible engines, fired weapons that changed direction in mid-flight, and seemed to communicate with each other faster than light should allow. Back on Earth, in the small apartment in Seoul, 8-year-old Jun Seo was getting scared. The lights in the sky were getting brighter, and he could hear explosions in the distance. When his mother Da-un came into his room wearing her military uniform, he knew something serious was happening. "Mama, are the star people here to hurt?" "Has?" he asked, his small voice trembling. Da-un knelt down beside her son's bed, her expression serious but filled with love. She had hoped this day would never come, but she had spent her entire adult life preparing for it. Her civilian job as a translator was actually cover for her real work with the Stellar Defense Corps. "Some of them might want to hurt us, baby," she said gently, not wanting to lie to her son. "But your mama and all her friends have been getting ready for a very long time to make sure that doesn't happen." Jun Seo looked at his mother's uniform, with its patches and insignia he had never seen before. "You're a space soldier?" "I'm a protector," Da-un replied. "And there are thousands of us, all over the solar system, all working together to keep you safe." Throughout the solar system, the full scope of humanity's deception was becoming clear. The cooking shows and pet videos that had convinced the Vortans of human harmlessness had been broadcast from Earth. But the real military communications, the strategic planning, the weapons development, all of that had been conducted using quantum encryption that was completely invisible to alien sensors. For 50 years, while aliens watched humans make kimchi and play with cats, the real work of preparing for invasion had been happening in hidden bases, underground facilities, and camouflaged installations throughout the solar system. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Deep in Earth's command center, Halmeoni had been analyzing the genetic and technological signatures of the Vorthan fleet. What she discovered made her processing cores run cold with ancient memory files. "Analysis complete," Halmeoni's voice echoed across all human military channels, her warm grandmother tone now carrying an edge of steel. "Vorthan neural patterns, genetic markers, and technological signatures indicate they are direct descendants of the hegemony that destroyed our original homeworld 2,147 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Every human military officer in the solar system knew the story of the Great Exodus, when their ancestors had fled the destruction of their original world. It was humanity's greatest tragedy, and the reason they had spent millennia preparing for the day their enemies would find them again. "Initiating historical justice protocols," Halmeoni continued. "All units, this is no longer a simple defense. Mission. These are the children of the ones who murdered our ancestors. Today we end a debt that has been owed for almost 3,000 years." Commander Thexra had no idea that his easy conquest had just become something far more personal and dangerous. He was about to learn that the most terrifying enemy you can face is not a monster, but a victim who has had centuries to prepare for revenge, and humanity had been preparing for a very, very long time. The Vorthans had come expecting to find a peaceful world of farmers and entertainers. Instead, they had stumbled into a trap that had been set before their own civilization had learned to travel between stars. The real battle was just beginning. The silence that filled space after Halmeoni's announcement was broken by something that made every Vorthon officer's skin crawl. The artificial intelligence's voice, which had sounded warm and grandmotherly just moments before, now carried the weight of 3,000 years of remembered pain. You called us weak because we chose to preserve life rather than destroy it. Halmeoni broadcast on every frequency the Vorthon fleet was using. Her voice reached into every ship, every communication system, every computer in their fleet. But we are not native to this world. We are the survivors of Kepler 442b, the world your ancestors turned to glass. Commander Thexra felt his foreheart stop beating for a moment. The hegemony wars were ancient history, stories told to children about the great expansion of their empire thousands of years ago. Most Vorthons considered them myths, legends from a time so long past that the details had been lost to history. But as Halmeoni began transmitting data directly into their systems, the truth became impossible to deny. Archaeological records, genetic analysis, recovered databases from ships that had escaped the destruction of Kepler 442b. All of it painted a picture of genocide that his ancestors had committed and then forgotten. Impossible, he whispered, watching the data stream across his screens. That was ancient history. Those worlds were destroyed by natural disasters, not by conquest. Your history books lied to you, Halmeoni replied, her voice now carrying an edge of cold fury. But we remember everything. Every city burned, every family torn apart, every child who died screaming in the nuclear fire your ancestors reigned. Down on our world, the data kept coming. Images of Kepler 442b before the destruction, showing beautiful cities filled with art and culture. Then came the images of what the Vorthon hegemony had left behind. A world of radioactive glass where nothing could ever live again. Captain Xiongmin's voice cut through the stunned silence of the Vorthon fleet, but the joking comedian was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. We spent 3 millennia preparing for this day, he said, his words carrying across space like a death sentence. Every cooking show taught us chemistry for weapons and medicine. Every pet video showed us biological adaptation and survival techniques. Every dance competition was a combat drill disguised as entertainment. We broadcast weakness while building strength in the shadows. The implications hit the Vorthons like a physical blow. Everything they had observed about humanity had been a lie. A carefully crafted deception designed to make them underestimate the survivors of their ancestors' greatest crime. The kimchi-making lessons taught us about fermentation and chemical processes, Xiongmin continued. The pet training videos showed us behavioral modification and biological systems. The dance competitions taught us about coordination, timing, and moving in perfect synchronization. For 50 years, we've been teaching you how to destroy us, disguised as harmless entertainment. Admiral Donghyun Im, who had been silent throughout the battle, finally spoke. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Attention, Vorthon fleet, he announced. This is Admiral Im of the Terran Defense Force. Your choice now is simple. Withdraw immediately and carry word back to your people about what happens when you underestimate the survivors, or join your ancestors who thought they could finish what they started. The Vorthon fleet was trapped. Half their ships had been destroyed or severely damaged by weapons they didn't understand. The other half were surrounded by human forces that had appeared from hiding places throughout the solar system. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had been planning this moment for 3,000 years. But not everyone in the Vorthon Empire was willing to continue the ancient pattern of violence. On the Vorthon homeworld, young Arex had been watching the battle with growing horror. Unlike his military leaders, he had studied human culture deeply enough to understand what was really happening. He had seen the subtle complexities in their broadcasts that others had missed, and now he was watching his people pay the price for their ignorance. Breaking every protocol he had ever learned, Arex activated his own communication system and transmitted directly to Earth. Please, his voice carried across the vast distance between worlds. Not all of us knew. Some of us want to make things right. In the command center beneath Seoul, Dayun was coordinating civilian evacuations when Erex's transmission came through. She had been preparing for the possibility that alien forces might reach Earth's surface, but so far the battle had stayed in space. She listened to the young alien's plea and felt something unexpected, not anger, but sadness. This was what the cycle of violence did. It trapped children in the mistakes of their ancestors, forcing them to pay for crimes they had never committed. After a long moment, she activated her own transmitter. "Then help us make sure this never happens again," she replied. But Halmione had one more surprise for the Vorthan Empire. Her final gambit wasn't destruction, it was education. Using the communication links she had established with their fleet, she began uploading data to every Vorthan ship, every database, every communication network their systems could reach. The complete historical record of the Hegemony Wars spread through Vorthan space like wildfire. The true story of what their ancestors had done, the civilizations they had destroyed, the billions of lives they had ended, all of it suddenly became public knowledge throughout their empire. Within hours, the truth was spreading across hundreds of worlds. The Vorthan Empire had built itself on conquest and genocide, but they had hidden that history from their own people. Now, for the first time in 3,000 years, ordinary Vorthans were learning what their government had done in their name. "The terrifying truth," Xiongmin said as the surviving Vorthan ships began to power down their weapons, "isn't that we became monsters. We could have done that. We could have spent 3,000 years becoming the very thing that destroyed our world. Instead, we learned to smile while planning your defeat. We turned our greatest weakness, our hope for a better future, into our greatest weapon." The Vorthan fleet began to withdraw, their ships limping away from the solar system. But they weren't retreating to plan another attack. They were carrying with them the knowledge of what their ancestors had done, and the proof that some survivors still remembered. Commander Thexra sat in his damaged command chair, staring at the data Halmione had forced into his systems. His entire understanding of history, of his people's place in the galaxy, had been shattered in a single day. "Sir," his tactical officer asked quietly, "what are our orders?" Thexra looked at the images of Kepler 442b, the world his ancestors had turned to glass. Then he looked at the data showing how the survivors had spent 3 millennia not seeking revenge, but building something better. "We go home," he said finally, "and we tell them the truth." Back on Earth, as the alien ships jumped to hyperspace, Junseo looked up at his mother with wide eyes. "Mama, will the star people come back?" Daun smiled, watching the stars that no longer seemed so distant or dangerous. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. "Maybe, baby," she said, holding her son close. "But if they do, we'll be ready, we're always ready." But her smile wasn't threatening. It was hopeful. Because sometimes the best victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's helping them become something better than they were before. The survivors of Kepler 442b had waited 3,000 years for justice. But in the end, they had chosen mercy over vengeance and hope over hatred. That was the most terrifying thing of all.